Aby jsme se navzájem nerušili. Tak, dobrý večer všem. Vítám vás na dnešní degustaci. Po 2 týdnech se opět scházíme v tento podvečerní čas. Jak jsem před chvílí říkal, je to poprvé, kdy jsme zasvětla, ještě před 14 dny byla v tuhle dobu tma. Takže se nám to hezky posouvá a jaro už je tady. To je dobře. Ještě počasí a už bude všechno tak, jak má být. A dneska si ochutnáme moc pěkná vína z Rakouska, speciálně nebo konkrétně z regionu Wagram, který není úplně znám, ale není daleko od česko-rakouských hranic, takže až se dostaneme k té lokalitě, tak budete asi vědět, kde přesně se nacházíme. A dnešní degustací nás provede Johannes Fritz, který je členem rodinného vinařství, Josef Fritz. I would like to welcome you, Johannes. Thank you for joining today's session, and I hope you are ready to start. I just introduced the tasting. We have today your wines, and we prepare 5 wines, and we will talk about them, and we will talk about your winery. So I would like to ask all the participants to pour into the glass first wine, which is Grüne Veltliner Classic. So prosím všechny tedy, abyste si nalili Veltlin Classic, Grüne Veltliner Classic. And I would like you to ask Johannes if you would start to describe this wine, and then we will slowly continue with the winery and stuff around all your information about your winery and how you produce and so on and so on. So if you could start to talk about Grüne Veltliner Classic, please.
Okay, so hello, and I also want to welcome you to the tasting. I hope everyone is healthy and able to taste. And right now we're starting with Grüne Veltliner Classic, and therefore I can also maybe somehow describe the wine region Wagram. So to imagine the wine region, the Wagram has simplified 2 layers. So we have the lower layer, where it is the poor, deeply löss, which is suited for Grüne Veltliner, and then we have a second layer where we have the löss included tertiary gravel and stones and sand. And for the Grüne Veltliner, the first layer is better suited, and that's why, because Grüne Veltliner Classic is not directly a defined single site, so it's a blend out of many different wine vineyards which are located on the first layer. So we have there a deep löss soil. Do you know löss? Maybe I can make a quick question. The soil löss. Anyone?
Sorry, once again, to translate the löss?
Yes, is löss already known, or should I describe the soil?
You can continue and I will describe later, yes?
Okay. Okay, so to this wine, this is our classic wine, so to our starter. It's classic fermented in stainless steel. It's a lighter wine, so we are just having 12.5% of alcohol. And for us, this Grüne Veltliner, it's important to have still the acidity. So it should be a young and a fresher wine. And therefore, we are also looking to select single sites, which are somehow not directly faced to the south. So it's a little bit cooler, and therefore we can keep the acidity, because Grüne Veltliner during these times has sometimes troubles with the acidity, because it's a variety where the acidity is not that high normally. And so for us, it's very important to keep this acidity and therefore to choose fitting sites. And to taste the wine, so the wine is classic, fermented in stainless steel, then not that stored that long on the yeast, because to keep this freshness in that fruit. And if you smell, it's more like green apple, typical Grüne Veltliner. It has also some fruity aspects, and it's very fresh. And if you taste the wine, there you somehow have the sometimes really known for Grüne Veltliner, the pepper or the spiciness. And also still not that broad, so it's more light-bodied, light to medium-bodied, and should be like a starter wine. So it's easy to drink, it's not that complex, and it's just have a clear, strict line and a clear and strict fruit.
So if I'm not wrong, you have more than one Grüner Veltliner. This is one of your major grape. This is the entry level, as you mentioned, and what other Grüner Veltliner you produce?
Yes, so we have 5 different Grüner Veltliner. And so we have also the system also for other varieties. We have the wine for the region, so Wagram, and that's like the wine is coming from from different vineyards, and then it goes up to single sites. We will taste a single site, for example, Himmelreich. We will taste it later, and so we have and they are also more full-bodied, so it's somehow built up like this. So with the first wines, we just want to represent the variety, how the variety is growing in our region, and for the single sites, then we want to present the different soils where the vineyards are planted, and also some of our type of wine. So there we are sometimes working with wood, and that's then later at the single site wines.
Frankly, I have to say that was first time that's my fault. You mentioned that this classic is entry level. It is a blend of different vineyards, and then you have produced the versions which are single vineyard, which is described on the label, right?
Yes.
Okay. Grüner Veltliner, as far as I know, is not your grape which you want to be present with. This is grape named Roter Veltliner, which we have not possibility to taste today, but if you can talk a little bit about this grape variety.
Sure, the Roter Veltliner, it's not related at all to Grüner Veltliner, also if the name sounds quite similar. And the name is Roter Veltliner, so red Veltliner, because of the skins. Roter Veltliner has red skins, but you cannot produce a red wine out of it because they are not the Anthocyane, which are responsible for the color. So just the skins like Roter Traminer is red. And this is a variety which is very difficult to handle in the vineyards. That's why the area was reduced a lot during the last century. And now it has somehow, it gained more into focus at our wine region in the Wagram again. And it's because it's completely different to Grüner Veltliner, because at Grüner Veltliner you need these deep soils with lots of nutrients where there's always enough water and enough of nutrients. And Roter Veltliner somehow needs a little bit of stress because they are a very thin skin. And that's why if there's too much water, for example, they are during ripening, they are cracking, and then you get some disease. That's why it's so difficult to find the perfect suiting sites. And that's also what I explained at the beginning. It's more on the second layer. So on the higher single sites, where you have not purely loess, where you also have tertiary gravel, or where you also have some stones inside the soil. This is better suited for Roter Veltliner compared to Grüner Veltliner. And another difference is maybe the acidity, which could be positive looking forward in some years when it's always getting hotter, because we in Austria we have also already some problems with acidity to still produce this light and fresh typical Austrian wines for the basis for the first wines, for example. And therefore, the Roter Veltliner has a little bit of an advantage in the case it is always around 1 gram or 1.5 gram per liter more than Grüner Veltliner if you compare the same year and nearly the same single site.
Is it difficult to cultivate this grape variety? Because I don't know any other region where this grape variety is produced in some wide scale. Some special grape for Wagram, or also the other regions doing it?
Many years ago, it was the most planted variety northern side of the Danube in Austria. But then we changed the training system, like the Lenzmoser training system. So the training system we all know from the vineyards, and this doesn't really fitted for the Roter Veltliner because the ranks. So when it can hold on the wire, Roter Veltliner doesn't produce or don't have that strong, so it hasn't not the possibility to stay in the wire, and that's why it's very difficult to handle because the spurs are always falling down and falling in all directions. And that's why it doesn't really fit it to this new training system. And so that's why it somehow the area decreased very fast. And it also had the problem that it was used for to produce big amounts of grapes. And there is the Roter Veltliner is not really suited. We are also reducing the grapes before ripening. So 2 weeks after blooming. And then there we were reducing the grapes because otherwise you will get too much. And then it's just, then the aromatic compounds are really missing. And Roter Veltliner also needs a very long time for ripening. So we really want to harvest it very late. That's why, again, we plant just on soils where we have gravel and tertiary gravel, so the berries are not cracking.
Mm-hmm. And if you say that the harvest is very late, what does it mean compared to the green Veltliner, for example?
We would say it also often depends, of course, on the wine style you want to produce, but 1 or 2 weeks later, it also depends very much on the year, because, for example, in the vintage 2018, because it was so early and so hot, there was the harvest was really compressed. There was no big difference, but otherwise we are harvesting this variety later. So around 1 or 2 weeks.
Okay. And if you compare production...
Máte zajímavou degustaci na to, že teda máte vole v angličtině.
Pardon, někdo si tam zapnul mikrofon. Poprosím. If you compare those two grape varieties, Grüner Veltliner and Roter Veltliner, by the production-wise, what is bigger for you, Grüner Veltliner or Roter Veltliner?
It's 50-50, around 50%. So it's equal. So we are not producing. So it's, yeah, we are producing nearly the same amount of Roter Veltliner and Grüner Veltliner, but considering the area under vinds, we are producing and we have more of Roter Veltliner than Grüner Veltliner because we are not harvesting that much at these vineyards because Roter Veltliner needs a really intense reduction so that we are cutting some of the young grapes to the floor. So it's at the ground around 1/3. And then you really can be sure that you will reach the gradation, so the sugar levels you really want to have, and you can also wait that long.
Okay, so let's move back to the wines. Let's taste now Grüner Veltliner Ried Himmelreich. So if you can explain first what Ried Himmelreich means.
Ried Himmelreich, this is called, so that's just a single site. So there at Himmelreich we have a defined area, and all the vineyards in this area are allowed to be sold under the name Ried Himmelreich. So it's the classic site. And this site is directly behind our house. So it's our nearest vineyard. And we also have, 2 years ago, we also opened a restaurant, which also has the name because it's the neighbor house. So it's actually one of a very important site for us. And the name Himmelreich comes from, because it's a very high, so also on the first layer of the Wagram, but it's a very high single site. And that's, and also it was typical that there is often used Himmel or words like this if you have high single sites. So for example, Gloria is also one of these. If the single site, the vineyards are very high, then you use names like this. But this is also purely less. It's also a little bit a colder single site. So it's exposed not directly, so it's not directly facing the south. So it's southwest. And also there is a small forest next to the single site, which also helps to have a cooler climate. And in the production, this wine, there we leave the juice and the skin together for around 4 hours. So that's why we want to harvest it. We always harvest this wine very early, that the grapes, the material is coming very hot into the cellar. And then we let them, we make a skin contact in the press already for 4 hours to get some of the flavors of the skins into the juice and the wine. But this wine is also fermented then afterwards in stainless steel. At the single site wines, we are not using yeast, so we don't use additional yeast. So they are fermented spontaneous. So because on the skins, on the berries, you have around 150 different yeast types or cultivars. And if you have more contact, for example, or also if you wait a little bit longer, then they start fermenting by their own. And then you have to the first 4% of alcohol, there you have some other different yeast types fermenting the wine. And then the Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is the classic yeast used for winemaking, is taking over the fermentation. And if you do it like this, the fermentation is a little bit slower, and therefore you have a higher contact with the yeast, which gives a little bit more fruit and a little bit more body, and it is more balanced. So we also store this wine a little bit longer, so around 3 to 4 months on the full yeast, and then until a short time before the wine is bottled on the fine yeast. And to look at this, if you taste the wine in the nose, you can see the ripe fruits, and but still fresh and it's young. And it's also very focused. I think I really like the single site because you have this nice combination between fruit and saltiness. And it's, of course, a little bit more the yellow fruits. So you have some hints of honey. You have also some hints of also apple, but more like yellow apple or pear. And in the flavor, it's also very strict, very focused, but more balanced. So it's a nice combination, or a really good balance because of the storing, because of the time which we store the wine on the yeast. So it's more balanced, and it's more, you get a nicer and a nicer body. It's also, I have the data here, the alcohol is 13.5, so it's a little bit stronger. So the wine is harvested around 2 or 3 weeks later than the Grüner Veltliner Classic. And that's for example, this single site Grüner Veltliner Ried Himmelreich.
Okay, you've been talking about the Himmelreich vineyard as a single, as the vineyard is surrounding your winery. How many different vineyards you have, like Himmelreich, pardon?
In Himmelreich, we just have one vineyard. It's just
okay. Himmelreich is one, but you have the other single vineyards, right?
Yes. So single site are just like we have right now in Austria introducing also Wagram the system, or we already have the system like in Burgundy. So we have the Village wine, and then we have Premier Cru. So it's just like a cru. So it's a defined area where you can cultivate this wine called Ried Himmelreich. And we, for example, have also the single site Steinberg, which, as you can hear in the name, you have a löss with a content of stones and gravel, which we use for Roter Veltliner, or Mortal. This is actually the highest single site of the region, or one of the highest single sites, where you also have again this gravel, and we also use it for Roter Veltliner.
Okay, I mentioned at the beginning that you are based in a region named Wagram, which is not the highlight of the Austrian between the Austrian regions at all, but you have very famous neighbors like Weinviertel, Kamptal, or Wachau. So you are in the same zone. If you could somehow describe what are the major differences between those two, not those two, but those regions which are surrounding you, because they are much bigger, more known than Wagram. So just want to.
I think Wagram is not that known because it doesn't exist. The name per se doesn't exist that long. It was not so many years ago that we all had the name Donautal and also Donauland, and then we split it, and then Wagram and Dreisental, for example, get their own names. That's why. Otherwise, the difference is, of course, somehow the soil, but everywhere you can, so next to the Danube, like for example, Kamptal, Kremstal, you can also find this löss soils, these deep löss soils. At the Weinviertel, there you have more the heavier soils. And other differences are, for example, like, from the varieties. So we also have, of course, Grüner Veltliner and Riesling, which is very famous for Kamptal, Kremstal, and Wachau, for example, and also Weinviertel, which they are focused more on Grüner Veltliner. And here we also have Roter Veltliner, and we have many different varieties, and there are many different wineries which are focusing on, more unknown or not that typical varieties. What I really like, that you can also find amazing Rote Traminer here, you can find amazing Chardonnays here. So we are completely somehow, we have many different varieties planted, and also some people who have really focused completely different varieties. And that's what I think is really interesting at the Wagram wine growing region.
Okay, just for me to know when it has happened, this split from the other regions to Wagram.
I don't know it exactly, but my father is maybe coming later, and I'm pretty sure he will know it, because it was, there are also some of the sites, signs where it's Donauland. So it's not that long ago, but I'm not completely sure. It was not, what I can remember, it wasn't a real date, but of course he will know a date, but it was somehow like a time when they started to write on the label Donauland and Wagram. So it was somehow a slower split, slower going into different directions, considering the name.
Okay, no problem at all. You can wait your father if he remember the date. Before we continue with the history of your winery, I suggest to taste the third one, which is Chardonnay Les. So if you can start to talk about this wine.
Okay, Chardonnay. I really like this variety, but I think Chardonnay has the problem that you can find it all around the world. So Chardonnay is planted everywhere. This is also the basic. We have two different Chardonnays. We have one is fermented and stored in barricks, and this one is also again fermented and stored in stainless steel. With the Chardonnay, we also are storing the time, so we are maturing the time on the yeast. As the name say, we have less soils for Chardonnay, but Chardonnay we are also planted, so these are also more like soils where we have a little bit of chalk to get like this nutty flavor, and also that crispy and saltiness into the wine. And in the nose, I think the wine has flowery notes, also the saltiness a little bit, and it's also a more medium bodied. And on the palate, on the plate, it's also you have the small hints of nuts, and you have like also a balance of saltiness, acidity, and also a little bit of residual sugar. This wine doesn't completely ferment until it was completely bone dry, so 0 gram or below 1 gram. So here we have around 4.8 grams of residual sugar, but this is naturally happened, so the fermentation just stopped. And I think it's a beautiful wine to present the basics, or the original type of Chardonnay, which is not combined with oak or something else. So that's just purely Chardonnay and purely fermented in stainless steel, also more a little bit on the more fresher side, on the more, we're playing more with the acidity and the nutty or saltiness aromatics in this wine. And that's what is for us really important, to also be able to present a Chardonnay like this. So not just a full-bodied, stored and fermented in oak or acacia barrels, so wooden barrels. So also to show how elegant this wine can also be if you don't use any different fermentation vessel.
Okay, thank you. So can we talk about a little bit about the history of your winery, when it started and who started it, and so on and so on?
It started directly here. It started around 1912, the winery, and now it's the 5th generation. But we were like many wineries, we were mixed. So we had animals, we had just classic fields and some vineyards. And then my father made the step then to just really focus just on vineyards, and then the classic field we are not using them anymore. And now I can ask him, my father came right now, wann hat sich Wagram und Ungerland gespalten?
Hello.
Hello, hello. Good to see you. Hi.
Nice to see you. So many people. The old region in our part was Donnerland, Danube, and it was till 2007. From 2008, we are Wagram. We are autonomous in Lower.
So it's really not too long history for Wagram alone.
Yes, the story from the government is not so long, but we in our winery always said we are from Wagram, not from Donnerland. Donnerland was not a old traditional name for a region. It was a construct of the law because they want to make the areas a little bit bigger because Austria is very small structure.
Mm-hmm. So if we can go back to the history, we were talking about your start. You mentioned that the foundation or beginning of the winery is around 1912.
Yes.
And when you really start to produce the wine, which generation it was?
It was to really produce starting wine. Also wann haben wir zum Weinbau produzieren begonnen? Welche Generation?
The first generation.
Actually, the first generation, but it was in a smaller size, so it was mixed again. So it was animals, also just classic fields, and a little bit of wine. And really, the big change came the last. So my father and maybe also already my grandfather made a change, but really to focus completely and just on wine. It was the last 30 years.
And how many hectares actually you have in the winery?
We have 15 hectares under vines.
15 hectares, and they are only taken care by your family, or you have some other employees, or how just
no, so we do actually most of the work by ourselves. I mean, you have some labor sometimes, for example, during harvest, when you just need many people because we are picking by hand, then you just need more people, but they are not always at our winery, so just at times like pruning or harvesting. Otherwise, we are doing it
60 days in the year.
All together. So my father got just said 60 days, around 60 days in the year, we have some people, some labor here, which helps us when there is time where you need just more labor, because otherwise we will not be able to handle this or to harvest the wine at the right time. So when we really say, now it's the perfect time to harvest this wine, and now we really need it, then we need, of course, some help.
Mm-hmm. So how many bottles you produce every year?
Around 100,000 bottles.
Okay, it's pretty a lot. And so we were talking about Grüne Veltliner, about Roter Veltliner, Chardonnay. You mentioned slightly Riesling, which we will taste later. What other grape varieties you have planted?
And we also have Weißburgunder. We also have Roter Traminer. And then we also have some red varieties, which is one put together in a cuvée. It's called Bocavina. And then we have Pinot Noir.
So, and how many labels all in all you produce?
How many labels all in all?
I know.
I think a little bit more than 20, but it's not every year the same, because some wines are only produced in the best vintages, and so we have not always the same. And so it's not. I also
don't know. It's really depending, and we're also not really producing each year the same wine. So sometimes we think the wine needs to be stored for a longer period. For example, with Grüne Veltliner Mortar, we store them for 2 years or for 20 months in the barrels, in acacia barrels. So it always depends. And then sometimes we can release the wine earlier and sometimes not. So it's, but I would say around 20 different wine styles.
Okay. So let's move to the fourth wine, which is Riesling Sandstein.
As I somehow explained earlier, so Riesling needs soil, so less combined with tertiary gravel and also stones. That's also because of the name Riesling Sandstein. For us, it's also important Riesling, where we are starting a new project right now. It's called Ried Schafberg, because Riesling is suffering a lot during the global warming, for example, and I made an exchange semester this year in Germany, and they are really focused on this problem, and they are thinking about where to plant Riesling in future years. And there we also try to think about it to keep this freshness and the peach or apricot smell, and also the acidity, which is very important to balance this high amount or intense fruit in the wine. Therefore, we're also looking where can we somehow look to plant vines in the future to still can produce wines like this. And so we are not, again, we are not using single sites or vineyards which are directly focusing south. So right now Schafberg is somehow more to the east, actually also east-north, which was when my father was young, he started with this project with the single site. And there he always had these problems that he doesn't get this so enough sugar. So the graduation was too low and he had to wait very long. And just in these years, it changed completely. And now we really appreciate to have a single site like this, where we still have acidity until we can harvest the wine. So we also have this possibility. And
I will tell a little bit about a story about this. When we visit, I think Johannes was 2 years old and his sister was 3 years old. We visit Elsass, and very popular wine producers in Elsass said to us that it's a little bit too hot for Riesling in some vineyards. And we in Austria don't believe it, that it can be too hot for Riesling, because Riesling is always very high in the acidity and is always low in the sugar. 20 years later, we have nearly the same problem, that some vineyards are too hot for Riesling. Not too hot for normal wine, but if you want to make a special Riesling with a typical Riesling fruit, you need the acidity. And so we also started to plant Riesling not in the best vineyards, because that we have the opposition that we can also play with the acidity and with the sugar. And 20 years before, I don't believe it, and now we're in the same situation.
So the visit of the Alsace was real motivation for you to start.
Yeah, yes. At this time we said Riesling. It is the latest ripeness in our production, and nobody don't believe that it can be too hot for the Riesling. When I was in school 30 years before, the people said you must plant Riesling in the hottest vineyards that they become full ripe, and now we changed. There's no winner in the
global warming.
In the global warming, but now we have to make other produce with the cold areas, and so we can work maybe the next 20 years with.
Ale vy nevydáš ještě, tak já poslouchám z Rakouska.
Ahoj Miloši, zdravíme tě, prosím, vypni si mikrofon.
Ano, vypínám.
Děkujeme.
Question or?
No. Newcomer just connected and he forgot to switch off the microphone. Okay, this was Riesling. If I see you together, it come up one question to my mind. How are the roles today in the winery? Who is responsible for what? Because you mentioned that the decision when you start to make, for example, the Riesling was when Johannes was 2 or 3 years old, and now I see he's fully involved in the winery. So how you work together today?
I think the most important decision, I mean, at the family winery, we are all somehow talking to each other and everybody's involved in each decision. But right now I'm still studying in Krems. So I visited the viticulture and pomology school in Klosterneuburg, but now I'm still studying. And so that's why I'm not 100% at home. I also want to do this autumn an internship in Germany again. So right now it's mostly my parents really doing all of it. So are all of the time in the cellar and doing all of the work together. And whenever I have time or whenever I come home, then of course I'm also in the cellar and also in the vineyards. And I also started a small project 2 years ago with a natural wine, which I produce. And so, but it's not that we have strict roles. So in a family winery, that's what I really like. So everybody knows about everything or each step. And of course, somebody focused on this. So my father is more focusing really on the cellar. My mom is more often working with the computer, so invoices. So it's somehow split it up, but you can somehow do, I think, everything. And that's what I also think is very important. Also, if we blend the wines, then we are also my mother and my sister, which is not in the winery. So in her future life, she doesn't want to be directly in the winery, but we also want her to taste the wine. And so to get many impressions. And I think that's really important, that we are not just, you're responsible for this and you're responsible for this.
Okay, I fully understand that. You answered the question with the expression that you're still studying and your father is still responsible, or your father with your mother responsible for most of the things in the winery. By the way, you mentioned your internship training. Where you plan to go, or you already somewhere going to?
No, I'm not quite sure right now. I want to go to Germany.
Okay.
Because I also talked to other winemakers, and there is now they're very innovative right now. So there's also like a big step, a big change right now again. And I think I also wanted to go where Germany is really good, I think, because there are also smaller wineries. If you want to, as an Austrian, if you want to go to Spain, it's very difficult to find wineries which have nearly the same size. And I want to be in a winery which is not that much bigger than our winery. Of course, the winery has to be a little bit bigger. Otherwise, the winery wouldn't take people working there, so doing their internship there. But I somehow want to be also part of all steps at the winery, and not just, for example, during harvest. If it's a really big winery, as I heard from some colleagues when they made internship in Spain, that they were just responsible for pressing or for the grape transportation or for grape receiving. And that's what I actually don't like. I just want to be in a winery where I can be part or be included in all steps.
Okay, and how many years you still have ahead for studying?
1 year. So after this semester, I have 1 year.
Okay, so almost finished.
Yeah.
And I have a question to Josef. What was your start when you started to produce? I mean, was it natural? You take it over after your father, or you were thinking about something else to do? Was this your primary choice to continue with the wines?
Wolltest du Weinbauingenieur schon werden?
Yeah, yes, I started 1987. I also make the same school like Johannes. It was at this time the highest recommended in Austria. It's possible in wine. Then I go at home. I also started with the university, but I don't finish because the work at home becomes more. When I started, it was a mixture of some different producing styles in the economic. We have fields, and my father was also not very old at this time. He was 43 years, and so I am the young one at this time for the wine, and my father make the other economics, and so we become a little bit bigger every year, and maybe at the last 10 years we are 100% for the wine production, and we have no other fields. And now the next generation is on my side, and it's very interesting for me because I always think if you have no perspective, if you have no new idea, you stay or you go back. And so it is perfect for me that Johannes goes also in the same way. And maybe 3-4 years ago, if I have a question, if the wine smells not perfect in the young time, I ask a friend, or I ask another wine producer, or I ask a sommelier. At this time, I need no second opinion. I can ask Johannes, and it's perfect because we have nearly the same idea about good wine. He produces his wines, this is the natural part. I produce my part, but each of us have to accept it, the other opinion. And so I think at this time is perfect, and maybe I hope it will be also in the next 10 years. Each of us has his part, each of us knows about his strongness, but he also is behind the other style of wine.
If you were talking about new ideas and directions, do you have some new plans for coming years? New grape varieties, or to make your vineyards bigger, or so on?
Yes, we don't want to become too big, because you can see at this time it was a very hard time in Austria for the big wine producers. We are in the size that is, I think it's the best size for handle these problems. We also, I don't know if you know it, we also have a small restaurant in our neighbor house. We make a very excellent kitchen there. We have a young cook there. He had three stars in Austria, and I think it's better for us, for me, and I hope also for Johannes, that we don't want to become too big, because I think in our size, it is much easier to handle such problems like Corona or some other problems. Mm-hmm. And maybe a little bit bigger, it's no problem. If you can buy an excellent vineyard, is your neighbor, you have to buy it. But we don't want to become bigger in our first idea.
Okay, so good to know that you have also the restaurants, and when we come to the regions, we know where to stop to.
Yes, you have to visit. They're very young. It's also a very small restaurant. Only 15 parks are possible, but maybe he's one of the 3 best in our region, one of the 10 best in Lower Austria, and he's very young. Maybe if you can look at our website, you can see a little bit of this, but it's closed since half a year. It's very horrible, but we have no problem. I think we can open in 1 or 2 months, and so we can start again.
So we hope we can travel in 1 or 2 months, and then we will have opportunity to visit the restaurant. So if we can move to the final wine, which is the red one. If everyone can pour the wine into the glass, and I will ask you to describe the importance of the red wines in your production before we taste the wine.
The importance, we have around 10% of red wine. So 10% around in our winery is produced. So it's red wine. And therefore we are, of course, we are also focusing on red wine, but we want to produce, considering red wine like this, also more the lighter style, because it's considering the climate, we don't want to produce this extreme full-bodied red wine. So we also just use big oak barrels, so no barracks. We just use barracks for white wine and not for red wine. And we also store them for a very long time there. And we don't want to like blowing up the wine to making it full-bodied and bigger and using tannins. So we just want to keep it strict and more fine, I would say. So very elegant, so not that with some grams of residual sugar, as you can also find somewhere in red wine. So we want it bone dry and just puristic style of red wine, which I think fits to our somehow white wine region, because Wagram is more famous for white wine. Some, of course, Pinot is also fitting here very well. Also considering future conditions, but it's still 10%, and we have 3 different ones, so 4 different ones, but we have Zweigelt, we have Pinot Noir, and the blend, which is Cabernet Franc, is St. Laurent, and it's also Zweigelt. Cabernet Franc, St. Laurent, Zweigelt. And this is our red wine production. Of course, it's not 100% in the focus, and we are also using a lot of the Pinot grapes for producing sparkling wine, which is growing a lot, so the market for sparkling wine. And it's also right now easier to produce sparkling wine in Austria, because we have the sparkling wine taxation is reduced, so it's not here anymore, it's not in law anymore in Austria, so we will start to try to produce by ourselves sparkling wine, because now it's allowed to store it in the winery without a special storing regulations or laws. But it's still interesting. Also, when I made my internship at Switzerland and I came home and I also tried to focus directly on red wine and just want to produce many different things. But it's somehow difficult at our wine region because in the gastronomy, normally the wines are chosen from regions where you already know it really stands for red wine. That's also why if a winemaker which is typical for red wine produce a Roter Veltliner or a Grüner Veltliner, it will also be not that, it can't be that focused. And I think that's also, it should be like this, but we are still like our red wines and we also like to produce it and also to have the possibility to offer everything, so a broad portfolio, and therefore it's also important for us.
I don't know if you remember, maybe most of them are a little bit younger than I think. They remember the light red wine from Südtirol, from Alto Adige. When I was young, it was very interesting for me that if you have a food pairing with wine, you started with white wine, then you have for a party red wine, and you change to white wine, and maybe to the meat you have red wine, and it was a mixture. At this time, most of the wines are very powerful, the white wines, and so you need maximal one red wine for the meat or for deer. And I said it was
Bad.
It was bad that we lost this light drinking red wines, and so I hope it comes back that wines like this becomes a little bit more popular, because some people don't like drink always white wine, but most of the very important red wines are very powerful. And the wines from New Zealand, or not from New Zealand, from Australia, or from South Africa, are very powerful. And so also the winemakers in the old wine world want to become always stronger. And for myself, I like red wines which are not so powerful. And this is the chance in our region that we can also make red wine with an easy drinking feeling in the mouth.
Mm-hmm. So that's why you don't use any wood for the reds, because of this philosophy.
We use big oak barrels, so just not barracks, but we use big oak barrels to store it. We just store all of the red wines in oak, but not new and not small, so there is not a big surface to get that much flavor from the oak or from acacia into the wine. So we just use bigger ones, like 1,000 or up to 1,000 plus liters.
Okay.
There we store.
I wrong understand. I had wrong understanding before. I thought that you don't use the wood at all, but now I get your point. So something to tell about this Blauer Zweigelt? Some notions.
I don't know if you remember, 2017 in Austria, it was a very warm year, a very hot year. It was not so dry like 2018. It was a little bit more rain, but it was also hot. And for myself, it was very interesting because 2018 was a little bit too hot, and so you lost a little bit of the freshness of the fruits. 2017 was a perfect vintage for red wines in our region. 2016 was a little bit colder, 17 was warm, 2018 was hot and dry, and 19 and 20 were a little bit colder. For us as a white wine producer, it's not a great problem, but red wine, I think it was in the optimum in 2017. Zweigelt, I don't know you know this old kind of variety. It is a typical Austrian grape variety. It is a cross from St. Laurent and Blaufränkisch. I don't know in English. It's Keck-Francosch and Saint-Laurent. And Zweigelt was an Austrian crossing of this both old grape varieties.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So is there any topic which we didn't touch and you want to talk about it? Gentlemen?
A question to us, or
Yeah, question to you. I was asking the questions, and if there is something I didn't ask and you want to talk about it, you can now.
No, I think. Are there any questions from?
Yeah, of course, I will ask then. If all the others have some questions, of course, you can raise them now. Máte někdo nějaké otázky? Došli jsme na konec degustace a teď je čas se ptát. So if there are no questions, I have no other questions as well. So I would like to thank you very much for your time and for all these comments and expressions.
It was very nice to see you. Maybe we can meet together in the real life, not on the laptop, and maybe I think it's much beautiful, much more beautiful, and it's nicer that we can see you in normal life. But maybe we have make some tastings like this, but I don't hope that it will be the future. The future should be the old tastings.
I also hope that the future is not this online life. Luckily, Wagram is not too far. It's really close connection to Czech Republic, and then during our journeys to this part of the Austria, we will for sure find the time and stop by and meet you in live. So once again, thank you very much for this session. It was really nice to taste your wines and hear all your comments, and hope to meet you soon, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you too. Have a nice evening. Děkuji všem za dnešní účast a uvidíme se za 14 dní u vín z Ústopeč a přivítáme pana Fabiga, takže se můžeme těšit na jeho Savignony. Tak hezký večer.